Okay, hi everybody. We're here today with Phil Sturgeon, who is co-founder of Protect Earth, and I'm Elliot Code, co-founder of Ecologi. Hey Phil, how you doing?
Hey, not too bad. How are you?
Very good. Always nice to catch up with you.
Yeah.
You're in our circles a bit of a minor celebrity. I think minor to moderate celebrity of tree
Okay.
planting. So we've had a bit of history on one side of the fence that you've been able to get plenty of trees funded through ecology, and now you're sat on the other side where you're actually doing the hard graft of planting the cells. So how do so the first half, how did you get to be top of our leaderboard with planting 100 and I think it's about 100,000 trees? Like how
Ah,
did you do that?
yeah, that was a fun one. So I was basically I'm a bike nomad. I don't really live anywhere. I kind of just cycle around, going wherever I want. And for I think most of 2019, I was trying to do like a fundraiser to raise just as many trees as I could. And so basically, I would kind of tweet out saying if you can I do like challenges. Like if you can get me 1,000 trees today, I'm gonna wild camp in this area that definitely has a lot of bears. Or, or I would, if people would let me stay on their sofa, then I would work out how much a hotel would have cost me, and then I'd put that into trees. And I did that with everything. A Serbian bike shop worked on my bike for free, and so I was like, okay, that's probably 250 trees. And
Nice.
someone gave me dinner and I put that into trees. Buy me a glass of lemonade from a Bosnian truck driver, another 20 trees. So
That's awesome. How do so at the point of the beginning of the journey, how were trees on the topic of on the forefront of your mind? Like, what's your kind of history leading up to that?
not much, honestly. Like before that, I was living in New York, and my concept of being environmentally friendly was when I'm driving 300 miles to a bike race in my SUV, I should try and make sure that I've got it full so that we're not taking two cars. Like that was my
Mm.
that
Yeah,
and yeah, that's helpful, but that's not the scale of solutions that we need at this point, right? So
yeah.
I kind of had a bit of a change of thought. I spent a month cycling around the Canary Islands after I was booted out of America, and then took a ferry to mainland Spain. Even then, at the time, it wasn't really because I was against flying so much. It was more because I didn't want to have to figure out how to pack my bike up and put it on a
Mm.
flight.
Yeah.
So
That
that
is an
helped.
absolute nightmare. Actually, I've encountered
Yeah,
that, and it's the unloading in a hotel room. Like when this is like a tiny square box, and there's
yeah.
just so much packaging, and then you end up with this giant bike bag, and
Exactly. You have to pack it
yeah,
before you get to the airport and then like drag this thing around. And half the time something gets broken. So I
yeah,
started off just kind of doing it for convenience and then realized how easy it is to get around without flying. And I haven't flown since 2019, which is cool.
nice.
But yeah, I got to mainland Spain and just everywhere I went was really just desert. And I know there are naturally deserts in a lot of parts of the world, but the part of Spain I was going through had been turned into desert by people cutting down all the trees and then just shoving in like vineyards. And it sounds pretty, but it was quite depressing. Like cycling around, there's just tumbleweeds and coughing up
Yeah,
dust. And the whole cycle from Spain to Albania, like everywhere I went was really, really just lacking in trees. You go to the greenest points on the map, hoping that you'll see nature, and it's all gone now. Um, and
yeah,
and it was genuinely really depressing. And I was just starting to think like, how can I use my kind of tech API skills to help make a platform where people can maybe donate to different tree reforestation projects and like build up a profile that shows how many trees they've helped to plant. And then someone told me that you'd already done that. Like, hey, I don't have to write any code.
yeah.
I can just use your thing. This is great.
It's thinking back to when that was, like mid 2019, when you search for what you were looking for on the page one of Google, there are a lot of really old school kind of web forms for doing
Yeah,
such a thing, and it was really a really different picture today, which is great. Tech seems
yeah.
to be helping here, which is good. Cool. And now you're planting your own trees. You've got your own planting sites. So under the kind of the name of Protect Earth, which is
Yeah,
a non-profit, I believe. So yeah,
absolutely.
tell us about that.
Yeah, so Protect Earth is a CIO, which means it's a legit charity. Basically, yeah, I was living my bike nomad life. Last winter, I went down to Morocco for a bit of warmth, just cycled down. And as I was cycling back, that's kind of when COVID really started to hit. So I was thinking, oh, I don't have anywhere to live in the UK. I should probably find an Airbnb or something just short term. And so I went to this beautiful farm, which I didn't realize it was like a cottage on a 460-acre farm, which is huge. And yeah, that week turned into 3 months. I was just locked down there. Yeah. And while I was there, I made friends with landowners, and I learned to hunt and fish and like forage for food and all this stuff, just kind of live off the land and really take my experiment of trying to live a low carbon footprint lifestyle like a lot further. And instead of going to the shops and getting plastic food, I was like eating, burdock and thistles and stuff, which is really fun.
Did you calculate what that would have meant to your footprint during that period?
Yeah, for a few months I was tracking my footprint. There was a really good personal carbon footprint tracker called North, but that's been sunset. They shut it down, which is a bit of a shame. But yeah, I had my lowest footprint months there. I think Morocco was nearly my lowest footprint month because I was staying in like yurts and mud huts and just like camping on the side of the road. But then I had to buy a replacement MacBook because my other one died, and that I might as well have flown to New York twice.
Yeah.
But yeah, staying on the farm was pretty low. But I was interested because I was still trying to do the tree stuff, and I really wanted. They have so much land, and huge chunks of it weren't being used. They have 60 acres of woodland that they often don't go in. They've literally said sometimes we forget we have that. 60 acres of ancient woodland is huge. And a lot of that is kind of struggling. There's Dutch elm disease is a problem, and so some of those elm trees need to come down, and there's a lot of deer around that eat up all the saplings, so there's not many new trees coming through. So you have this really big kind of really big canopy that's eventually going to be gone, and then kind of nothing at the lower levels. So that ancient woodland needs a little bit of help, but they also have a lot of land in between, just kind of like lumps that are a bit wonky in between their fields. And so we were seeing if we could get them connected with you to plant trees, and in the end decided that, hey, let's just make a charity out of this, because they're not in a particularly unique position. Most farmers and landowners have bits of their farm that they're not really using, which sounds a bit silly, but
why aren't they using it? Like what are those bits that are essentially kind of write-offs in terms of like a productive farm?
Yeah, well, so this one, for example, Sam's farm is it is on the Cotswold Way near Durham, if you're local to that area. But basically, it's right on the edge of the Cotswolds, which is a huge hill. It's a big plateau at the top of the Cotswolds, and because it's right on the edge, it's really slopey, and you can't farm slopey land, right? Like you can throw some sheep up it, and they can figure themselves out, but tractors will fall over. So what has happened a long time ago, like this was a farm in medieval times, they've kind of leveled out, so it's more like steps and plateaus up to the top.
Yeah, I remember when I came down to visit the site. Yeah, I saw these kind of these steps in it, and
sure, medieval really lynchets.
Yeah, what was it? Sorry,
they're the medieval lynchets. Yeah,
right. Yeah, yeah, that's incredible. Didn't like each like medieval family had like a step in the hill that was there. It's actually like a long straight allotment.
Yeah, it's really cool. I'm learning a lot of stuff about this as I go. I've never heard of those before, but yeah. And there were much bigger ones as well. So not necessarily just the lynchets, but like there's a huge flat field and a huge flat field, and in between that there's a bit of a slope. And they can't do anything with that. So you can put some trees in there. And so yeah, generally when you've got a big tractor running around and you're harvesting, you can't get all the way into sharp little corners, so you can plant trees in that corner, And so
do those pockets add up on this particular farm? And then like have you since seen other farms also with this kind of similar opportunity, not really problem, but an opportunity for a load of trees to go in?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of different potential opportunities. There's kind of corners and margins, as we call them, and a lot of farms have those for sure. I mean, this is quite a large farm, 400 acres of active farmland, and we managed to find, I think, well, we found 5 that we were trying to plant this winter, and then there's probably another 7 of bits that aren't really being used that we could do another time before we get into kind of restoring the ancient woodland. So yeah, a lot of farms have a similar thing, and Another good area for planting is basically, hedgerows. Everyone knows that you often hear hedgerows being mentioned as important, and they really are. For the last like 50 years, the approach to farming has been like, get rid of as many hedgerows as you can, get as much square inch out of your field out of your land as you possibly can, because that means you can plant more stuff and get more stuff out, right? That's just been general accepted advice. And now not only are hedgerows starting to come back through grants and subsidies, but people are putting trees in there, and like strips of trees. And that might just be to make a wildlife corridor. It might be because trees generally suck down a lot of nitrogen and other useful stuff out of the air and take it down lower so that the crops can then suck that back up. And it might be to protect from the wind, and there's a million different reasons why people want shelter belts and new hedgerows. And a lot of the time, because farming is, a business, they might be interested in planting trees for whatever reasons, but not necessarily have the money to do it. And yeah, a lot of them have the motivation. It's trying to get the money and the motivation at the same time. Some of them are very motivated, but don't have any money. Some of them might be able to, might have the money to do it, but don't necessarily realize why it's beneficial. And so there's a lot of different ways in which you can approach that and talk to people about it. But whatever approach you take, there's a lot of trees that can go into farms, because I think a lot of people treat agriculture like it's a bad thing and conservation like it's a good thing, and we have to take away all the land from all these bad farmers that are causing all this CO2, and we have to give it into the hands of these good conservation people who are going to look after the forests. But
I think that's
we need food.
Yeah, exactly. That's what really initially appealed to us like an ecology, because the land that you're talking about is mostly in the southwest, and what often comes with funding a tree is you're funding the land, the private land, to be bought for the purposes of that tree. So it has massively brought down the prices, which is amazing. But then then you don't get the land with it, and so then comes the question over kind of the long-term security of those trees. So I know that in our kind of agreements that we've got, we're already on, already working on it essentially. But what are kind of the main areas to secure these trees? They're not owned by you, and so how do they stay upright and healthy?
Right. So there's a few different approaches that we take. Some of these projects we team up with the Woodland Trust, and so they'll give you a big old discount on the cost of the trees, which is quite helpful. And that means that we can kind of give some of the money to the landowners who are then, they're basically being paid to maintain those trees, right? So they don't have free work that they have to do. And so that money can be spread out over a long time. So they get like a nice little yearly kickback, and we go and check to see how the trees are doing. And if suddenly the trees have all vanished, then give us the money back. When they're partnered with the Woodland Trust specifically, the Woodland Trust make you sign a contract saying that they'll be there for 30 years. So that's one level of protection. And then there's the money being spread out over time is another protection. But then there's also the fact in the Cotswolds specifically, you need to have like a timber felling license to take any trees down. And you have to go through like a planning permission process with the Forestry Commission. So once those trees are there, it is actually quite hard to take them down unless you want to, potentially go to jail. So there's quite a few different types of protections depending on where they are, right? Once it's outside of a area of national outstanding beauty, then it is easier to take those trees down. So that's when you need those other protections. But anything in somewhere like the Cotswolds is pretty well protected.
Yeah, I see. And your background isn't forestry, so how are you're presumably not just able to operate independently and kind of pass this off as kind of the world's most responsible reforestation organization. So what expert how do you bring in that kind of expertise essentially, so that you're lowering the risk and increasing the confidence essentially?
Yeah, absolutely. The first project I was doing pretty much just said, Woodland Trust, please help. And they will send an advisor out to go and have a look at the land and mark down what species and everything else. And they'll give you all the information you need. But since then, that was just when we were doing the one Sands Farm project. Now we've got a bunch of different projects all over the place. we do it ourselves instead of farming out to Woodland Trust, because it's just a easier, quicker, and we have more control over the system. And I'm saying we because the team grew pretty quickly. There's 3 folks on the board of directors. We've got a treasurer, we've got a secretary. Comically, 2 of us are software engineers as well, but we have a whole bunch of other people that know a lot more about trees. We have a chartered surveyor who's able to help us figure out like grants and interactions with the Forestry Commission. We have a conservation officer who knows all about exactly which tree should go where. This is like loamy soil, so it needs these type of trees. He's always saying, oh, you could mix in a few wild cherry with some sea buckwheat or whatever it is. And I'm like, I've never heard of that type of tree, but absolutely. Yeah. And then we're also talking to nurseries, and they know where the trees are going to go, and they'll give us some advice on like, oh, that might be a bit late in the year to be planting these, but you could probably plant those. So there's a lot of people involved who know a whole lot more about trees than I do, but I'm learning as I go.
Awesome. It's really great. So you've got 3 or 4 different projects on the go at the moment. So what's currently on, what's happening right now, and what's coming up?
Yeah, so Sands Farm has been a bit of a nightmare. There have been several setbacks. We thought we applied to plant in August, thinking that we get our permission in 30 days, and we got our permission today, which is February the 12th. So some projects can take a bit of a long time. There's a lot of bureaucracy to try and fight through, but that should be happening in March. But other projects have been keeping us busy. We have 500 trees near Landodroid Wells. They just call it Landod, I think.
Yeah.
So 500 trees went in there, and the landowner is going to plant probably another 200 over the next couple of weeks. We did 2,000 trees, 1,440 at Donkeywell Farm, which is near Cirencester. I'm going to go check up on those tomorrow. I'm going to cycle over and have a look. We've got 1,660 trees happening in Lower Hampton Farm, which is another one near Cirencester. And we've got 1,700 happening in Middlesbrough, February 28th. And 500 happening. This one's really interesting. It's a fishing club have got this bit of land that they own. It's this bank on the side of a very active river, and the soil is being eroded. And so they have fishing rights to land that soon won't exist. Nice. So we're gonna plant like 500 trees along this riverbank, and that will keep all the soil kind of locked in and together. And the leaves coming down will replenish soil by leaves decomposing and things like that. So all of those projects are happening in the next before the middle of March, basically.
Oh, that's awesome. Plenty going on, and a lot of cycling to happen in between those. Yeah,
I try and avoid fossil fuels whenever I can. So it seems, I know that you could do the math and you could work out the balance, but it just seems so silly to drive to go plant trees to suck up CO2. Like I can't do it. So yeah, it's a combination of bikes and trains. I nearly died getting to the Welsh one, cycling through the Brecon Beacons in the middle of winter with snow on the ground. But yeah.
So we at Ecologi love seeing the impact that we're making. How can, with partners like you, that we can help kind of communicate the impact that our subscribers or individuals and families and businesses are actually making? Like, how else can you try and bring that alive, so to speak? Like, what comes to mind?
Yeah, well, one of the first things we're trying to do, we take a photograph of every tree and its GPS coordinates, right? So we know where each one of them are that we planted. Something that I'm really interested in trying to figure out is being able to come back to those trees later and show an update on them, show a new photograph, or maybe mark out that one didn't make it, right? There's a lot of trees, there's a lot of reasons why a tree might not make it, from deers munching the top, mice digging underneath the tubes, generally an air pocket when it was planted that wasn't squished down well enough. There's a lot of different things that can cause a tree not to succeed, and 80% is expected as a survival rate, but it would be nice to be able to track that really well and communicate that really well, so that there's a lot of insight into it, because obviously there's a lot of trust issues around with reforestation efforts. That it's an area that has just been rife with scammers, because when you incentivize anything, you get someone trying to manipulate that. And so I think the more kind of clarity on showing how the tree's doing and putting them on a map so that you can go visit them, because a lot of the trees that we're planting, I mean, most of the UK countryside is quite close to a public footpath. And so theoretically, you could go and have a look at these trees that have popped up in your profile if the location's there. So yeah, I think just trying to show people how those trees are doing over time. And even if we can't do the fine grained, this is this tree exactly, like maybe we can put QR codes on there or something. We have to figure it out. We can't do anything that's so expensive. Someone said like RFID tags. I'm like, great, now the cost per tree's gone from 150 or £2 to like £8. Great. But yeah, anything we can figure out, we can. I fly a drone around. You know, I've got some footage from the Welsh planting site that I want to try and upload. And yeah, just showing people how things are going the best we can.
Nice. Do you think you'll be able to correlate the kind of? I know you take a GPS reading every time you plant one of the trees, including the species and the photo.
Yeah.
Do you think you'll be able to correlate an overhead drone pass on, scanning over the project? And you won't be able to get that exact one, but be able to somehow calculate that under that flight path, like a frame from the video of the drone could be taken, and then I don't know, it wouldn't have to be every month, but maybe like, I don't know, every 6 months, for example, you could, when back on Ecologi's forest, you tap on your own forest within Ecologi, tap on the tree, and then see the most kind of recent overpass. That would be that would be my own sort of dream, I'd have to say. Just being able to see it, even if it's in grainy, blurry.
It is in there, honest.
Yeah.
It's absolutely something I'm trying to do. Basically, I've got a DJI Mavic Mini. I got it like a week before the Mini 2 came out, which is just typical. But I bought that one because it's the lightest possible one. It also has the fewest features, and if you drive it towards a tree, it will just hit the tree. It's not very intelligent. But I would like to. I got that because I was cycling around and I wanted a light one. But for twice the price and twice the weight, I can get one that can track routes. So you can basically upload photographs to it, and then it will plot a route to go to all those photographs. And it will just autonomously do that. And so that's exactly the plan. But Protect Earth, the idea is that we're going to go back and check on those trees at least once a year, as often as we can, realistically. And so hopefully once in summer and once in winter would be ideal, because in summer we want to see that they're getting enough water and they've got enough mulch to retain that moisture. And hopefully help them survive, any more bonkers climate change heat waves. And then again in winter, because that's a good time to do any restocking of any that didn't make it, right? So when I go, it'd be great if I can just throw up the drone and have it already on a pre-programmed route so I can get on with digging. Because the last couple of times I've been at the site, like I'm just there messing around with my drone, and then everyone else is doing all the hard
volunteers.
Work. Like, no, this is important.
Yeah, sure it is. Absolutely. I'm seeing more and more kind of opportunities for satellite imagery to really help, but there's not much to see from space for a good few years, presumably, but there are some really clever ways of interpreting the satellite imagery photos and kind of building kind of carbon maps out of that tech. It'd be really neat to ultimately kind of weave in some of that as well. So especially when it comes to your monitoring, you'd be able to see the kind of the increase in biomass compared to your baseline of before, essentially, of kind of other projects.
Exactly. That is the future of where we're heading. So there is a company out there who's recently changed their name a year ago. It used to be called 20trees.ai, and they do exactly what you're talking about. They buy very high resolution satellite images and then use AI to figure out like what type of trees they are and how old they might be, and all this really intelligent stuff that it's very impressive to me. But basically, because of the cost of those images, it's completely not financially worth doing unless you're like 1,000 acres or 10,000 acres. And so for our farms, like 5 acres here, 5 acres there, 2 acres there, it doesn't work. But so as we scale up and as we start to work with larger farms, we've got a few lined up for next year. I think the smallest of which is like 9 acres. We are going to look into doing verification, actual woodland carbon code verification. So people are helping to plant the trees, which is focusing on kind of the ecology aspect of it. And then through the Woodland Carbon Code, you can basically do a verification before and then after 5 years and after 10 years and after 20 years and after 30 years, where someone comes running around with a tape measure, sees how big the tree is, figures out how much of that's water and how much of that is carbon. And then you know, like, definitively how much carbon you soaked up in this forest. And you can sell this off to companies for carbon credits, which is a bit of a funny scheme. You know, carbon offsets are a bit of a topic, but if it can fund reforestation, then it's probably something we should look at. So yeah, we'll get more into monitoring and verification as the projects get bigger, is the point of that.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I've heard only great things about Woodland Carbon Code, and you know, with carbon offsets, I know what that kind of grimace is, and that's the kind of the free open market of carbon offsets. And then it's those standards like the Woodland Carbon Code really adds the level of quality that isn't as needed. You know, there are two ends of the spectrum of you know, really brilliant certified climate projects, essentially.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and it's being administered. It's being administered by the Forestry Commission, and in the Southwest, a lot of the work is done by the Soil Association. So those organisations are a little bit different from like Ryanair. You know what I mean? There's quite a gap between those. So yeah, there's definitely kind of scams in the space, but I don't assume the Forestry Commission is trying to do a scam.
No, absolutely not. And then, you know, what would be the point? Indeed. Right. All right. Well, Phil, I think we'll probably better leave it at that, but really exciting. Looking forward to working with you for a lot longer and seeing how these projects carry on developing. So thank you for your time, and see you around, no doubt.
Yeah, thank you for your support. Cheers.